Hello, Mystics. My name is Ashley Ryan. You probably know me better as Pythian Priestess. A lot of you have asked for my origin story and about me video, and it's taken me a really long time to make it because it's a sad story. And I am also very aware of not making the spiritual journey about myself. It's about something greater than me, the goddess. The number one question people ask me is, how did I know that I wanted to be a priestess? And that started when I was 4 years old, believe it or not. If I go back into my memory, one of the first feelings that I felt about religion was rejection. When I was 4 years old, my babysitters were my great aunts, who happened to be Benedictine nuns. I have this very vivid memory of running through the formal dining room with my cousins and the nuns stepping out in front of the doorway. And I was like, oh no, we're going to be in trouble. We shouldn't be running in the house. But instead, what they asked me was, would you like to get married to Jesus? Would you like to be a nun? And I thought about it, and that didn't seem very exciting to me. And so I replied, no, I would rather be a priest. And the nuns told me that I couldn't do that because I was a girl. And that rejection put into motion the search for truth. And I was determined from a young age to understand truth. So much that I started reading Plato when I was 14 years old. And no, I didn't understand it the first time I read The Republic. But it propelled me to understand the world. That spiritual defiance would come up again when I was 14, and I went to a Renaissance fair for the first time, and I wanted to get my palm read. Like, that was so important to me, was getting my palm read. I wanted to know the future. The woman who was reading, she said she thought I would enjoy tarot cards more. And I was like, I don't know what tarot cards are, but sure, let's do that. And as soon as she laid those cards in front of me, I knew that this was the most sacred object I had ever seen in my entire life. And I don't remember a lot about the reading. She told me to be aware of the guy I was dating at the time, that he was a tricky man, or a tricky boy, she said at the time. And at the end of that reading, I looked at her doe-eyed and big, beautiful innocence and said, where can I get these cards? Because I was ready to cross oceans and climb mountains if I had to. My mom was not happy to find out when I had gone to get this reading. She told me that it was a sin. And deep down, I knew like that couldn't be right. Like, there was something so special about these cards and the connection that I felt like I had to have them. And it was the original Rider-Waite-Smith deck. It's actually the deck that I use today. It's not my original deck from like 17 years ago or whatever, but this deck it inspired me. It gave me an understanding that I had never had before of spirituality. I decided to major in philosophy and theology, and I am so blessed that I get to use that degree every single day of my life. Philosophy taught me how to think, not what to think. And I was not stoked about taking the theology part when I was in school, but it was a requirement to do both for the major. While I was in college, I didn't really have anyone to talk about the occult with. The philosophy nerds would think that you're cuckoo. The theology people weren't really interested. But I lived in this really unique city called St. Augustine, Florida. The way that I was able to express that interest safely was by being a ghost tour guide and sometimes paranormal investigator in St. Augustine, Florida during college. I worked for a company called Ghost and Gravestones. I really did enjoy this job until the gross stuff started happening. I had some pretty terrifying experiences with spirits in St. Augustine. This was my first real deep experience of malicious energy. I was scratched by the spirits in private places, and I was harassed by the spirits. I felt breathing down my neck when I would go inside the old jail. It was awful. And I would take pictures of these things, these scratches that I got, and nobody believed me. There was a rumor that I was creating the story for drama to get attention or whatever. And I thought that was ironic because we were a ghost tour guide company, and now all of a sudden, like, ghost stuff starts happening and we don't believe the woman. Okay, that makes sense. There was a spirit at the old jail that enjoyed, I guess, hunting me. That's how I would describe it. I felt like I was being hunted from the moment that I stepped onto that property to the moment that I left the property. And remember, this is ghost tour guide, so if we're ending at midnight, 1 o'clock, like, it's late. And if I'm doing an investigation, it's going to be even later. It's like 2. I decided to, like, go away from my friends who were smoking because we were all hipsters and it was cool to smoke cloves in 2011. And I went over near the old gallows, and these old gallows had been reconstructed in the original spot that they were standing, which is so gross on its own and kind of disrespectful. But beyond that, I was, like, on my phone messaging or texting someone, and I, like, looked up at the gallows, and I remember seeing this, it's like empty black hole feeling that was staring at me. And all of a sudden, the gallows dropped. And I screamed like I was being murdered. And I ran. I ran all the way into the break room, and I started hyperventilating because I was so scared. And everyone told me, they're like, oh, that's just, it happens sometime. It's not a good, like, magnet or something. And, like, I knew that. I knew that it had fallen before, but the feeling of the spirit, like, breathing up against my neck at certain times at night and receiving those scratches, and then that, it was just too much. That's when I discovered what, like, real danger was. And that this wasn't playtime anymore. So yeah, after all of those experiences, no one believed me. And I said I had to quit because I couldn't go into that jail every single night and subject my physical body to the violation that was being done to it. And it was good money, but it wasn't worth my physical and emotional, energetic, spiritual safety. And that's one of the reasons why I teach protection magic, especially to paranormal investigators, because you're walking into a danger zone, a war zone, especially when you go into places with malicious or disrespectful spirits. And there is a mixture of all kinds of magical energy there. And I started dating someone who was being initiated into Espiritismo. And I learned a lot from him and his mom. I'm very grateful for their love and their support throughout my life. They both played beautiful roles, helping me understand my purpose, that I was to help people. And I didn't understand at the time. I was 19 when she told me that in my Reiki session she was doing, that I would help lots of people and I wouldn't even know it. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to really do that. It was also 2010. So a lot has changed in 15 years. So who is Pythian Priestess? Pythia was a real priestess. That was a title, and that wasn't her name. Pythia was the high priestess at the Oracle of Delphi in ancient Greece. She's actually right over here. She was the most respected woman and oracle in Greece. Generals, kings, philosophers would go and seek her wisdom. And she's particularly special to me because when I was in undergrad, I had this moment where I was in a philosophy of religions class, and I opened the page and it was talking about the Oracle at Delphi, and it called her a priestess. And it was like 1,000 doors opened in my mind. And I was like, whoa, you can be a priestess? That's a real thing? And I was so enamored with her and her connection to the divine and the power that she held, the ability to communicate with worlds beyond, really captivated me. So, in true millennial Tumblr fashion, I made an email address and I hoarded this username on every platform. And I actually didn't use it until 2019. In 2014, I graduated with my BA in philosophy and theology, and then I packed up my bags and moved to Los Angeles to pursue my MFA in writing and producing for TV. And that was probably one of the darkest periods of my life. I loved being in LA, but going to a place where nobody cares about you and everyone's looking out for themselves, it's very lonely. It's so lonely, in fact, that sometimes you start dating people who aren't good matches for you. And I let this relationship go on for way too long. There were so many times I could have ended this relationship with somebody, and I didn't. Until my breaking point on Valentine's Day for 2019. Jeez, it's hard to say that even now. I swear, I did not plan to break up with my fiance on Valentine's Day. It was just ironic timing. The universe has a funny sense of humor. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about that relationship. It was not a healthy one for me, and it was really suppressing my energy and my magic. I will say one thing. When I lived with that person temporarily, I couldn't do magic in that house. In fact, I bought 3 different 7-day candles, the big tall candles in glass, from 3 different occult stores in LA. And every single one of them, the glass would crumble. Like, even when the candle wasn't lit, the candle was just sitting on the altar, it would crumble. And the pressure of that relationship was crushing my magic. And so I decided on Valentine's Day that I was done. And I left. I gave him $3,000 and said, here's my part of the rent until the lease is up. And I moved to a different place. It was really hard. It was a decision where I really had to break out of a spell that I had put on myself. And that was one of the bigger turning points in my life. A lot happened in 2019. I also became internet famous in 2019. I made a TikTok account because someone at my job at MTV's Ridiculousness was like, hey, you do witchcraft, right? I was like, yeah, I do that. And they were like, you should go on TikTok. And they've got like a whole witch community there. And I was like, are you talking about the dancing app? Okay. So I did. And I posted some videos, just some stuff about tarot. I didn't show my face, but it went so viral. It was incredible. I gained 20,000 followers in 14 days. And I was like, okay, like, this is crazy. I'm shocked that people are into this because my entire life I have been keeping this a secret because people thought it was weird because it wasn't acceptable. And now 20,000 of you love me. That was mind-blowing. And it really, it set me on a new path. So I called my manager. I was like, surprise, over Christmas I became internet famous. And shout out to my manager. He's been amazing helping me build my brand and has been there supporting my moves in so many ways since 2019. I've always had a connection to the goddess. As Dion Fortune says, all goddesses are but one. And I believe that the goddess, Isis, is one of the best representations of the feminine divine. Isis, or her Egyptian name, Aset, has appeared to me in many different forms over the years. When I was a child, she was the Virgin Mary and the nurturing mother energy. When I got older, I started to see her in the Egyptian form as Aset. And her first appearance in my life that really stuck out in that form was when I was in high school, maybe 16 years old, and I was at a jewelry convention with a guy, and I remember seeing this beautiful piece, this pendant of Isis with her wings stretched out, and she had the solar disc on her head. And I was enamored, and I knew I had to buy it. So I opened my wallet and emptied out the little money that I had for this pendant. I wish I still had it. I was really focused on learning ceremonial magic. Like, I knew that was super important. I knew that the goddess was involved in it some way, and I just needed to find someone who would teach me, which turned out to be really hard. It was really hard to find someone to teach me ceremonial magic in Los Angeles until I met Sal at the Crooked Path in Burbank. And I took his ceremonial magic class, and at one point he mentioned that there was a group that was dedicated to the goddess Isis. And all the alarm bells went off in my head, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is so important. Okay. And so afterwards, I went up and asked Sal for the phone number, which is now defunct. It doesn't work anymore. And I went through 3 stages of interviews, a background check, and then I was initiated right before COVID. And during my initiation, I was ordained as a priestess. I knew that this was like the most transformational moment of my life. And I can't talk a lot about it. I can't talk about the tradition. I can't talk about anything because I took an oath of secrecy. And I take that oath very seriously. And I'm so grateful that many of the YouTubers that I have collabed with respect that. And that is such a gift, because once again, I'm going back into like the silence. And I've learned that silence is a huge part of the occult. To dare, to will, to know, and to keep silent. A lot of people ask me what I do in my free time. I read these books. I read the books. I watch a lot of horror movies, and I listen to audiobooks when I do chores, which are mostly fiction, interests in cults and paranormal mysteries and detective novels written by women, not by men. I live a pretty quiet life now. I used to go out and party. I used to go to the club. I used to do all these things, but being a priestess and living my life in service to others and for the goddess has been very different. Surprise, outfit change. While I was recording this video, I saw that the second half of it didn't save, so I have to re-record it. During COVID, I was really blessed to work with Michael Simon and Scott Kushner on a project called the Occult Unveiled podcast. This podcast allowed me to connect with people from all over the world in their different variations of magic and witchcraft, and that was such a blessing. Magic is not simply one thing. It is not just the way I practice it or the way you practice it, but it is a universal shared experience by humans. And that was a huge mission of the Occult Unveiled, to share that same mystical experience that exists in every culture throughout time. I highly recommend that you check out the Occult Unveiled. It is a vast array, a library of occult knowledge, from Haitian voodoo to thelema, talking about kitchen witchery, Welsh magic, and so much more. I learned a lot when filming that podcast, not just in my occult knowledge, but also growing as a speaker. I've always publicly spoken, especially when I did like tour guide work, but being in front of a camera is different. And learning how to conduct myself on live recordings is hard because I swear a lot. One thing I didn't talk a lot about in the first recording of this was like my struggle with spirituality. And I see a lot of people who are struggling with belief. And it's hard to have that in this day and age. And I am so blessed to have my understanding of Nietzsche and how science replaced Christianity in a lot of ways in this like unwavering faith. I think that science can explain a lot of things, but I also think it's one side of a coin. Magic, alchemy, mysticism is the other half of it. What science explains in data, the metaphysical world is explained through in metaphor. And Plato did a wonderful job of this with his analogy of the forms. We see that throughout philosophical history when Descartes talks about his meditations. He talked about conversing with a demon. Like, that's insane. Like, philosophy is so dead in our modern world, and it's very depressing and sad, but that could be a whole other rant for another time. For me personally, the pursuit of truth with a capital T has always been what I've wanted. To understand the truth and nature of the universe. And I did it in every way that I could possibly think of. And being a priestess has been the most fulfilling for me in that way. Because I have this connection to the world beyond, the divine, the goddess, the god. And it gives me such a state of peace and understanding that this world is an illusion. And what exists beyond it is beyond my comprehension. There have been times where I've been absolutely lonely, like so miserably lonely, because there's not a lot of people out there who do what I do on not just a magical level, but the way I've always been a loner. Ever since I was a child, I was horribly bullied. But it's from those moments of profound loneliness where I find the greatest depths within me, finding that connection to beyond. And that's something that reading all these books has really given me, is a format on how to think about things without falling into conspiracy theories. I don't like conspiracy theories. They used to be fun and cute like 10 years ago, and now there's like cults. What happens right now in the postmodern age is that there's a lot of fallacies in the logic that's in conspiracies, and there's a lot of assumptions. That's no good. And that leads us down some pretty slippery slopes. And it doesn't go anywhere. It's just fear-based. So staying away from hate and staying away from fear and trying to present truth to people is ultimately what the mission and goal of the Pythian Priestess brand is. That's another thing. So Pythia Priestess, while very sacred and special to me, is not my magical name. People can call me Pythia or Pythian. I will absolutely answer to that. I have a lot of names. But my sacred name will be kept secret. And I appreciate you honoring that and my oath. Which leads me up to like the Sam and Colby stuff, I guess. So the Sam and Colby partnership started in 2023. I received an email from their producer who asked if I would come read tarot for those guys. And I said, sure, yeah, I'll come read tarot. I had no idea what I was walking into. Like, I'll be honest, I really didn't know much about them. I knew they were ghost hunters. And when I gave that tarot reading, it has to be in the top 3, like, hardest readings I've ever given, because there was nothing in that reading that was positive. It was all pain and black imagery. And I cleansed the guys, and I was like, wow, that's the best I can do. And I just went on with my life. And then later I found out that poor Colby had been diagnosed with testicular cancer. And that was a rush of like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that that happened. But also it was very validating. And I was very blessed to return to collab with him for Hell Week in 2023 at the Conjuring house. That experience was also very interesting because I've always been obsessed with spirit boards, or what you probably know as a Ouija board. Growing up in a very Catholic household, in a very Southern family, like the occult was just not talked about. It was not something that was mentioned. And the Ouija board was the only symbol that I had that I could display as like my interest in this. I even made my laptop a Ouija board back in college. I didn't actually use it or anything. I just liked having it on there. I thought it was fun. I had t-shirts and like sweaters and stuff. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So, in June of 2023, I like had this desire to finally read a book I had been putting off for a long time called Aleister Crowley and the Ouija Board. I bought that in like Kansas or no, it wasn't Kansas. Where was I? I don't know. Was it somewhere in the Midwest? And I found it at this thrift store, and I was like, this book seems like a good read. And I learned how to properly use a spirit board. I learned that there are specific evocations you have to do, some invocations, you need to draw certain things. The board needs to be made out of a specific type of wood, painted a certain way under certain moon cycles. And I was like, okay, cool. That's what I'm going to do this summer. I'm going to make my own spirit board. And I ended up taking it to the Conjuring house. I had never used it with somebody else before. I had used it with myself and my partner, but I've never conducted other people doing this. So that was like kind of nerve-wracking, but it was amazing. And even the guy said that was like the craziest experience they've ever had with a spirit board. And you could see it too. I think the most intense moment for me, I don't know if it's on the final film. There was a moment when the James spirit was going back from A to Z. It was like stuck in a loop. So it would go from like A to Z, A to Z. And I said, James, stop. And immediately stopped. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of that. That's right. And it was just like this like moment of like, oh, okay, like this is working. It's going to continue to work. I'm in control of this. That being said, the spirit board, it takes a lot of energy, not just from the people who are moving the planchette, but it's also the spirit. It's pretty hard to move things from the other side, believe it or not. It was also that same night where one of my tools broke. Now, I've never really had a ritual tool break before. I've had candles like explode on me and stuff, but for an actual tool to be severed or harmed was really intense. And we were at a crossroads at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. It's like in the middle of the night next to this old cemetery. And I had invoked Hecate. And I was removing negative energies and cords from Colby. And right when I like went over his head, my malachite and obsidian dagger, which is a powerhouse tool, I got it from Mexico, broke in half for no reason. There was nothing wrong. It was completely fine. And it just snapped. And that was another moment of like panic. It's like, oh no, what do I do? And I've realized throughout my life, there will be moments of panic like that where it's a test from the goddess as part of like, have you grown? How can you act with honor? And thankfully, I brought my backup dagger, which was a selenite dagger that worked just fine and removed everything. After a divination on like why that happened, essentially the cord was too thick and the obsidian took too much. It took too big of a hit and it snapped. So I healed it. I glued it back together with glue, copper wire to keep it securely in place. I let it charge for about 6 months and it's been just fine. So I think that leads us up into 2024. And I, once again, got invited to Sam and Colby's Hell Week. And I was not expecting it to go the way that it did. Originally, when I agreed to do this, it was a cleansing. Happy to cleanse, happy to help bring new energies in, flush out the old. But the day I arrived, very different. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but essentially, I was presented with, this is what's been happening. This is the difficulties that we're undergoing with this energy in the boiler room. So after some divination and understanding what that entity was, I was asked to trap and remove it. And I teach this. I know how to do this in theory. I've actually never had to do it. I don't really need to capture spirits very often. And so I was like, oh, yes, I can do that. As strict in theory. And the guys knew that going into it, that this was, it seems like that it's a theme with them. It's like untested ground. I went in with like full conviction that ritual would work. I spent 20-ish minutes like in meditative prayer beforehand, preparing myself for the work. I had all of my research ready, all of the right materials, and we were successful in removing the spirit. Now, whatever is currently at the school now, whatever's come through the portal, I don't know. I'm not there. But whatever was at the school was removed. And oh my God, my heart's like beating even thinking about it. It was so stressful. Um, yeah, oh my God, it was so stressful. But I love doing that. I love working with Sam and Colby. It's such an honor to read for them, to be their spiritual advisor, and I'm very blessed. Ooh, the other thing in 2024 that happened was I had to break a blood oath for the first time for Colin, who runs the Paranormal Files. That was also really stressful. I had no idea we were going into that. Yeah. So in that video, I remember specifically like coming in, we're doing like the spirit board session. I found out Colin has this like connection to Hecate, which is amazing. I was like, great. So it's going to work extra well. And through that session, find out that they had made some irresponsible blood oaths to what was presenting itself as an orc or an ogre. It doesn't have a name because it is not worthy of a name. It is a lower level infernal spirit. And so with the blessings of the goddess Hecate, I was able to use the purple or violet light in order to help remove that from their sphere of sensation. Yeah, I was also nervous because like all the cameras are going at that time, and there's not time for me to sit down and be like, let me just process all of this real quick. Like, let me just like figure this out. No, but it was very rewarding. Like you could see the change in him and just the relief that I felt too after doing that. It's like, okay. So I don't do that for everybody. It's a lot of work. And I love that people reach out to me and want work done with them, but that's not something that I can always provide. A lot of my life, I like to think of myself like the Pythia, where I am the oracle. I'm the one who brings the message from beyond to you, and then you get to decide what to do. Occasionally, I will do work for other people, which is why I have a spell consultation available on Etsy. So if you are looking for spell work or healing, let's talk about it. Let's see what I can do for you. My whole life is magic, and I'm so excited. That's what it is. I'm so happy that that's what my whole life is, that my life is this. Like, there's nothing that I have wanted more in my life than having truth and wisdom. And I didn't understand what that was when I was younger. I didn't know what esotericism was. I didn't know what the occult was because it wasn't in my culture. But I am so happy and blessed to be living it now. And I'm so grateful for people like you watching this video who are interested in what I do. And I think I've covered pretty much everything that really goes over my origin story, right? Like my search for truth, now bringing that truth to you and helping other people make the best decisions in their life that they can to live a life of honesty, of truth, integrity, and love. And so with that, my friends, I will leave you. Thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't already, check out the Pause with Pythian podcast. I actually will teach you how to meditate. You can meditate with me and really grow in your own spiritual life. Take care.